Good evening. It's really such an outstanding pleasure to see you all here today. This is our 9th Pinnacle lecture series, and it's amazing to me how over the years it's just grown and grown, and I can't tell you how wonderful it is to have all of you here and see so many of you who I'm getting used to seeing and looking forward to seeing as we have these once a semester events with really outstanding nurse leaders speaking with us. So I'm Susan Gennaro, I'm the Dean, and it is truly my pleasure today to introduce our Pinnacle Lecture Series, who is Dr. Maureen Gormley, who is a BC graduate from the undergraduate program. How many people graduated the same year as Dr. Gormley? See? See, this is a goodly amount. I'm not saying unless you all want to divulge what year that was, but I know it was an excellent year full of truly fabulous nurses. Before I introduce Dr. Gormley, let me do the thing I have to tell you about contact hours. So today is eligible for 1.5 contact hours that will be provided by the Boston College Cornell School of Nursing Continuing Education Program. And in order to get those contact hours, you have to have registered at the registration desk outside. If you do this year there's an online evaluation. So if you registered, they'll send you the link. And then when you get the link, if you go in and do the survey, you will then get a certificate when you complete. I like to know this because this is a mandatory continuing education state and important to collect all these things. So let me go back to the introduction of Dr. Gormley. So Dr. Gormley is really a star in her own right, the Chief Operating Officer of the NIH Clinical, you just told me what the real name of this was, Clinical Center, which is really an amazing thing, not only being a Chief Operating Officer, which is wonderful, but not all of us wind up in that role. So really different, and we'll be interested to hear Dr. Gormley's talk about leadership and making leadership really real. But also very interesting to be at a place like the NIH because it is the only hospital in the world that is dedicated to being a hospital that is 100% research. And so the kinds of clinical trials and research that's done there really are state of the science and groundbreaking. So really exciting to be the Chief Operating Officer there and to be in such a wonderful facility. I've had the pleasure and the privilege of visiting Dr. Gormley in her office, and right outside the window is I guess it's not called the jungle gym, but the children's playground. And it's just amazing to sit there and think about who are patients at the NIH and what their stories are. So we're very fortunate that Dr. Gormley has a lot of stories to share with us. She's been at the NIH for more than 27 years and now is overseeing the administration, operations, patient support services, and many other high-level functioning areas. Dr. Gormley has her baccalaureate degree from Boston College and her master's and PhD from Fielding Graduate University in Human and Organizational Systems. So I know you'll be very interested, as am I, in hearing about how are you a leader at such interesting and different places, but how are you a leader in a way that makes leadership very real and very concrete. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Maureen Gormley.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dean Gennaro, for that warm introduction and for inviting me back to BC. I had a great day today. Met with a lot of students and faculty from the BC School of Nursing, and it just felt so good to be back. And I learned a lot. I have no conflicts to disclose. I do have to disclose that all of my roommates from 1985 are here. And I'm going to be trying not to look in that direction for obvious reasons. So we were in the class of 1985, and I'd like to begin with a short nostalgic video clip of a miracle that took place that year. We're coming up on the 30th anniversary of that Hail Mary pass from Doug Flutie to Gerard Phelan. And it's one of my fondest memories of my senior year. The top photo there is of me, Doug Flutie, Susan McGilvery, who's here from Rochester, Minnesota, the Mayo Clinic, and Gerard Phelan. And I put that photo up there because I'm wearing an apron. It was before I became fully empowered in my role. The bottom right-hand photo is of me delivering the commencement speech to our School of Nursing graduating class in the spring of 1985. I'll be giving the same talk today. So I'm grateful to Dean Gennaro for inviting me to speak today because my roots at Boston College are really important to me. I remember clearly the first time that I walked onto the campus, and I felt inspired by the place and hopeful at the thought of attending. When I came, I thrived on the academic challenge, I enjoyed living on campus, and I cultivated treasured friendships. Boston College is a place of high standards and strong values within the Jesuit tradition. And part of authentic leadership is knowing where you came from, what your values are, and for nurses, using who we are to influence the way we care for patients and interact with colleagues at all levels. I'm confident that a part of who I am today, both personally and professionally, were shaped by my 4 undergraduate years here in Chestnut Hill, and I'm delighted to return to share some of my experiences with you today. So my career path, at least in terms of nursing careers, has been a rather unconventional one. As I started into clinical rotations in my junior year, I began to realize that while I was keenly interested in nursing, I loved the body of knowledge, I loved working with patients, and was attracted to working in the hospital environment, I somehow didn't feel drawn to pursue a career in clinical nursing. My roommates might tell you that it was because I was afraid of giving IM injections. And that may be true, but at the time, though I didn't have eloquent words for the career desires I had, I just knew I wanted to pursue a career in healthcare on a somewhat different path. It's fair to say that I had a vision, but I didn't have words for it. So I learned of an MPH program from a friend who encouraged me that nursing school was a great background for hospital administration. So my senior year, while the majority of my classmates were choosing their nursing specialties and landing great jobs at the Boston teaching hospitals and beyond, I was filling out applications for graduate school. Since I was not following the traditional or conventional path of entry into a nursing career, it took a little convincing for me to get some nursing faculty to write me letters of recommendation. I don't think that would be so difficult today. So I moved to New Haven and completed an MPH at Yale 2 years later. When I was about to complete my degree, I was entertaining 2 job offers, one with a healthcare consulting firm and the other with the National Institutes of Health. So I went to my dean at the program and I said, could I have your advice? And it was a really short conversation. He told me there are hundreds of consulting firms, but only one NIH. So I moved to Bethesda, Maryland, where I began my career at NIH, accepting what was supposed to be a 1-year fellowship in hospital administration. When I arrived at the NIH and began my career, sadly, I felt like I had left nursing. This was because I hadn't followed the traditional path. People would say to me, oh, you're a nurse, what's your specialty? And I was a bit stumped as to how to reply, because my view of nursing at the time was not an expansive one. In fact, it was pretty narrow. I believed that because I wasn't practicing clinical nursing that I had left the profession. Several years later, after working at the NIH, I had let the renewal of my nursing license lapse. And in a conversation with my then and now boss, the director of the hospital, Dr. John Gallen, he urged me to renew the license, articulating that an RN license was among the most important credentials I could have. Nurses run hospitals, he told me. So with the letter of his support to the Board of Nursing in Maryland, I hastily renewed my license. And that event marked a bit of a turning point for me. Over the years, my perceptions have changed. I oversee many activities in the hospital that support the direct delivery of patient care. I partner closely with our chief nurse and many other clinical professionals in full collaborations, and together we weave the interdisciplinary care team. I'm clear that my specialty is leadership in support of delivery of the highest quality of care for our patients who are our partners in clinical research. 2 years ago, I was invited to a BC alumni event at a private home in Georgetown, attended by Dean Gennaro. And Susan began the evening by articulating the changes afoot at the BC School of Nursing. Her vision called for developing strong nurse leaders, removing barriers to practice, diversifying the profession, and collaborating across disciplines. She encouraged nurses to take the opportunity to study internationally and acknowledge the importance of the broadest view of nursing within the healthcare enterprise. That evening, Susan captured my vision with her words, and I felt enlivened and encouraged at this contemporary view of nursing. So with that as a bit of a background, I'll use my own career to reflect with you on how we as nurses can assume diverse and vital roles in the healthcare enterprise. Like any individual's perspective, I acknowledge mine is biased. It's based completely on my experience over the past almost 30 years at the NIH. My experiences have led me to maintain a strong connection with our patients and have reframed my view of nursing. In this environment, I've learned many lessons from many disciplines and lessons about myself that have helped me learn and grow as a leader. So today my objectives are to explore a little bit about the NIH, the Clinical Center, and my role, to talk about organizational leadership through the concepts of authenticity and empowerment, and to reflect on implications for nursing professionals. So the NIH is a federal agency under the Department of Health and Human Services. Our mission is to improve human health through research. Specifically, NIH scientists seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. The NIH consists of 27 institutes and centers organized by systems of the body and/or disease group. I'm sure you've heard of the Cancer Institute, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, the National Eye Institute, and so forth. The NIH budget is $32 billion annually, 90% of which is allocated as grants to academic researchers across the United States. And at the heart of the NIH campus in Bethesda, Maryland, is the NIH Clinical Center. As Susan mentioned, we're the largest hospital in the world dedicated entirely to clinical research. A majority of the institutes and centers at NIH have their clinical research programs right at the Clinical Center. So each year we admit patients from all over the United States and some from abroad to participate in clinical trials at the Clinical Center. We have about 1,600 active research studies at the Clinical Center, and the research focuses mostly on patients with complex presentations of common diseases or with rare diseases. And a lot of the research focuses on first-in-human studies. A little bit more about the Clinical Center is that since we opened in 1953, we've seen over 480,000 patients. We have about 9,000 new patients annually, and our new hospital, which opened in 2005, has 240 beds. The hospital has a budget of just over $400 million, and we're literally a hospital enveloped by research labs. So the labs are right across the hall from the patient care units to promote translational research from bench to bedside and back again. All of our patients are on a research protocol. The care is free. It's all provided by the U.S. federal government as part of the research program. We have in the clinical center about 700 nurses, but working in the complex, we have hundreds more than that who work for the institutes, and they have many diverse roles running research studies and supporting research. In the complex, we have about 1,255 credentialed physicians, and since our patients come from all over, we provide travel and housing as it's needed. Some important accomplishments that happened in the clinical center are listed here, and I won't read through all of them, but it's a long list and it's an impressive list. And in 2011, the clinical center won the Lasker Bloomberg Public Service Award for over 50 years of contributing to discovery in medical research. Our most recent accomplishment was that we took care of nurse Nina Pham. She came to us from Texas Presbyterian Hospital, and she was actively infected with Ebola while caring for a patient there. She was discharged on October 16th from our Special Clinical Studies Unit, which was specially designed to be able to provide safe care for patients requiring any level of infectious disease isolation. A dedicated nursing team specially trained in infection control played a central role in her recovery. This slide depicts the contrast between clinical research nursing and clinical nursing research. Nursing practice at the clinical center is within the specialty of clinical research nursing, which focuses, as the slide lists, on the care of patients participating in research. And this is distinct from clinical nursing research, which is research conducted by nurse scientists to advance the profession. At NIH, most of this research happens under the umbrella of the National Institute of Nursing Research, which was founded in 1986 to promote and improve the health of individuals, families, communities, and populations. At the clinical center, we have a small hospital-based Department of Nursing Research focused on exploring health behaviors and self-management of chronic diseases in the context of health disparities, mostly doing mixed methods research. When patients arrive at the clinical center, at the front door of our hospital, they're greeted in our atrium. It's shown here. It's fair to say that this is an overwhelming experience for many who have come to Bethesda, often in search for their last chance for hope. So while my responsibilities are varied, as a nurse, I feel most passionate about the aspect of my role that relates to our patients. I work with my team to figure out what we need to do daily to understand and translate patient and family needs. We have trained our entire staff to be sensitive to the experience of patients and families, and it goes without saying that our nurses play a prominent role in that regard. So that leads me to the heart of my talk today, which is empowerment in nursing. This is a theme that I carry with me from nursing school and a topic that I've kind of paid attention to my entire career. I remember as a student nurse being told that nurses have to fight for our place at the table and figure out how our individual and collective voices can be heard. In preparing for this talk today, I reviewed some of the nursing literature on empowerment and found the following themes: that we need to re-examine our beliefs about gender identity in order to identify new possibilities for leading in nursing, to battle the struggle to maintain authority of nurses in nurses' hands, to fully claim our power as women, to stop flogging the dead horse about the myth of empowerment, that was kind of an old article, and a call to lead ourselves out of oppression. So in my view, some of this literature is a bit discouraging because it seems to lead us down an avenue of collective victimization. Nevertheless, empowerment remains important. Like many professions, nursing has been strongly influenced by its development within the healthcare system, which itself is a long-standing and well-defined hierarchy. So how can we reframe the topic of empowerment so that we as nurses can take up our roles proudly and fully despite the well-established organizational power structures? In order to understand properly the meaning of empowerment, it's useful to first explore the concept of power, which I distilled here into two avenues of power in organizations: structural and personal. Structural power is related to resources. Somebody early on in my career told me, if you want to know where the power is in organizations, just look at the way the money is flowing. It's associated with position or standing, so people think they know you have power or they assign you power based on your title. It's relationship dependent, meaning that if somebody depends more than somebody else to get their job done, then they have a dependency on that person has power over them. If you think about that for clinical nursing, patients probably really feel like they don't have much power because they're so dependent on us just to even meet their basic needs. And finally, this definition of power can be potentially limiting. The theory of structural empowerment was developed by Cantor, who saw employees' workplace behavior as arriving from conditions in their workplace, but not really from their personal attributes. Nevertheless, structural power is necessary in organizations. We know that. We know we need it to hold people accountable, to manage budgets, to evaluate performance. We certainly need structure. However, for the reasons I articulated here, structural power is not enough. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So we also need personal power, which is a kind of a complementary view and discussed more in the social sciences than in the management literature. Personal power is cultivated through growth and development as opposed to control over resources. It's associated with self-efficacy, not with your title. I'm going to talk more about self-efficacy in a moment. It's internally driven versus relationship dependent, meaning that no one assigns us personal power. Rather, we tap into our intrinsic need to make a difference and our desire to get something accomplished. We see what needs to be done and we take the initiative to do it. So personal power is expansive because it really goes beyond the hierarchy, which becomes quite irrelevant. Your power is based on credibility, and people with personal power are pretty autonomous. So the empowerment process is important in organizations for leaders to know how to make it happen. How can we as individuals, regardless of our roles and where we find ourselves in the hierarchy, experience power, and how can we reinforce it to others? First, we have to recognize the conditions. I think a key role of leaders in organizations is to recognize the conditions so that we don't overreact to them. Overreacting to people or conditions is a waste of our energy. I'm constantly telling my staff when they complain about organizational conditions, which are most often in the form of complaints about people, you know how the animals behave. Why are you surprised about that? So that explains the animals there on the slide. As a side, about 20 years ago, my husband and I went on safari in East Africa, and that's when I kind of first got this cognition. For 2 weeks, we rode with local guides and vehicles across the Serengeti. And I recall with amazement how from extreme distances the guides could describe the behaviors of the animals. We could barely see the animals, and the guides were saying, look at how that leopard's ear is perked or the cheetah's back is hunched. He's about to pounce. And they translated these behaviors for us so we could better understand the ecosystem we were exploring, how the environment with its threats and its offerings was influencing the animals to behave and react in certain ways. Well, sometimes in my organizational leadership role, I feel like a safari guide. And it's not because I work with animals, it's because I've come to realize that the systems in which we work have a tremendous influence on the ways in which people behave. And understanding the system and the people in it allows us to translate that to others so that we can influence how they react to it. My message here is that it is a lot easier to understand what's happening in our environments and translate it than it is to constantly fight it. We can change our reaction to aspects of the environment that bother us rather than wasting all our psychic energy to try to change the environment itself. So once these conditions are identified, empowerment strategies and managerial strategies can be used to try to help remove the conditions. So these are just kind of what I call simple, basic management practices that we can do in organizations. We give people opportunity to advance. We give them information so they can do their jobs. They can understand what's going on in the bigger system so that they don't get daunted by it or frustrated by it. We provide them support because jobs can be really, really frustrating and people get tired. And we provide them under ideal conditions the resources to do their jobs. So those are the basics. However, translating or effectively managing the conditions and doing these management strategies successfully isn't always possible. And even if it is, it might not be sufficient for people to become empowered unless the strategies and tactics lead to growth in individuals so that they actually feel that sense of personal power. Personal power is derived differently. It spawns from effective relationships and communication channels with sponsors, peers, and subordinates, both within and outside the organization. I always say that the way I get things done in my organization is by having good relationships. It's not anything that has to do with the hierarchy. It's related to a concept called self-efficacy. So what is self-efficacy, and how do we as leaders unleash it in organizations? Now, this is a nursing audience, so I can do a little bit of this, right? Self-efficacy theory comes from Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory. People with a strong sense of self-efficacy view challenging problems as tasks to be mastered, develop a deeper interest in the activities in which they participate, form a stronger sense of commitment to their interests and activities, and in organizations, we always want people who operate with commitment versus compliance, because those are two very different modes of operation. And people with self-efficacy can recover quickly from setbacks and disappointments. The challenge sometimes is to try to get individuals to believe that they really do have power in affecting outcomes. But if we can unleash this in organizations and get groups of people who aren't victimized by the conditions in our environments, but rather people who pursue maximal impact on their jobs regardless of the challenge, then we have people working with commitment in organizations. So how does this all come about in organizations? Authentic leadership is a style that I think is key to unleashing self-efficacy in organizations, and it's really the umbrella under which all these strategies for empowerment can take place. Authentic leaders focus on having genuine interactions, building followers' strengths, creating a positive and engaging organizational context, instilling self-confidence in others because they have it themselves, and creating meaning at work. Authentic leadership has nothing to do with where one sits in the organization, but has everything to do with transparent and ethical behavior that encourages openness and information sharing. And that can be done at any level. Frontline nurses can be the most authentic leaders in an organization. And authentic leadership is also a mode where leaders accept input from those who they work with. So I want to just go through a couple of strategies, 4 interdependent strategies that I think we can, as leaders, focus on to be authentic. One is our self-awareness. That's knowing who you really are, knowing what you're good at, and knowing what you're not good at. And another big part of self-awareness is understanding how your emotions impact your actions. And I think that's really important. One of the pleasures I have in my organization is to be the deciding official on all employee removal actions. It's really not my favorite task. But what I've come to realize with experience is that I cannot be hijacked by the interaction that I'm having right at the time when an employee comes to meet with me, because sometimes I feel really sorry for people and they have really good stories and I don't want to have them lose their job. And other times I feel angry at people because I think if you put this much energy into doing your job as defending why you should keep it, So I try to really understand in any interaction around a conference table or with a group of people, how are my emotions impacting how I react? Because we never want to get hijacked and then regret something that we've done. So going along with self-awareness is balanced or unbiased processing. And that is, once you know what you're good at and what you're not good at, you need to be honest about it. Once we allow ourselves to acknowledge that, we're able to better figure out what to do ourselves versus what to delegate to somebody else and give them a chance and let them step up and get some organizational spotlight. The other thing about balanced processing or unbiased processing is that we should try to seek divergent opinions. Did you ever come to a table at a meeting or have an interaction where you yourself already felt really strongly about what the outcome was going to be? Sometimes for me that happens with my husband. So you have trouble listening and really hearing what the other people are saying, but in hospitals, being able to listen and seek divergent opinions is really important because nurses on the front line especially have to be able to say what's going wrong. And if they can't buck the hierarchy and have their honest voice at the table, then you're going to get clinical errors. So we need to have environments that invite people's voices. And we also need, as leaders, to address challenging situations. If we're truly being authentic, we're not running away from the conflict. We're figuring out how to stay in it, address it, and not damage our relationships in the process. The third component of authentic leadership that I put here today is relational transparency. This is a little hard to see, but it's a glass-bottom canoe. And relational transparency has to do with self-disclosure. It's being honest about why you acted the way you acted so that you stay in relationship with people, so that you are behaving in congruence with what you say your values are. When you lose that as a leader, you lose your credibility as a leader. So for me as a leader, one of the things that I'm really all about is flexibility. I need it in my job. I'm a working mom, and I love my job, and I'll work as many hours a day as I need to, but sometimes I need to drive soccer carpool. And I'd like my staff to know that they can have flexibility too. But sometimes when it gets really, really busy and I can't leave the hospital and I lose my flexibility, I realize that's not the best time for somebody to be asking me to enhance their telework schedule or to have an alternative work schedule. So I'm honest with people. And I say, and this happened last week, I think that it might be okay, but can we not talk about it right now because I'm in the midst of feeling really bad about flexibility. So I'll get back to you next week. So just being honest about where we are makes people honest back to us. So then the final thing, and this kind of wraps all four together, is authentic behavior, acting in alignment with our values, and then people will perceive us to have integrity. In addition to understanding the environment, we have to exercise sensitivity to the environment. And I'll tell you, I think the most important reason for this is self-preservation. You don't want to come to the table complaining about things because it won't do anybody, including you, any good. So sometimes we have to hold back, and it doesn't mean we're not being authentic. It just means we're being strategic. So finally, one of the most important things, and I'm kind of sorry I only have it in a small box here, but one of the most important things about authentic behavior is operating with presence. Being really present, taking time to slow down, get beyond our desires to do just the tasky work because it feels immediately satisfying, and spend time with people. I almost missed an opportunity last week to do this, and I'm glad I didn't, so I just want to tell you about it. There's a housekeeper who works in our front lobby, and I see him every day. His name is Bobby, and he's terrific. He always has a smile on his face. I know he makes the patients feel good. He does a great job. He's a completely committed employee. So about 18 months ago, he hit the lottery. He won $1 million. And I could not have been happier. I think we had a lingering hug that morning, and I kept asking him over the past year, Bobby, when are you going to take a vacation? So finally he told me a couple weeks ago, Miss Maureen, I bought my tickets. I'm taking my girlfriend on a 5-day Carnival cruise, and it's my first flight. So he came back, and he was all excited. This was only about a week ago, and he told me he had his pictures with me. And I was on my way to the elevator, of course, rushing for an 8 o'clock meeting. And I said, Bobby, I so want to see your pictures. You know, where are they? And I'll come back later. And then I thought, this is so more important than getting to my 8 o'clock meeting on time. So I turned around and I sat with him in the lobby for 15 minutes, and I went through every one of his pictures. And I'm so glad I didn't miss the chance, because it was the best part of my day. I love this quote on presence from Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot. She's a sociologist who's been a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education since the 1970s. It was much later that I realized Dad's secret. He gained respect by giving it. He talked and listened to the fourth grade kids in Spring Valley who shined shoes the same way he talked and listened to a bishop or a college president. He was seriously interested in who you were and in what you had to say. I really like that quote. Earlier this year, I was with my sister, who was a patient, and my family at one of our Boston teaching hospitals, and it was a really stressful time for our family. Our distress was as a result of my sister's pain and the uncertainty and having to interact with a different resident every time they rounded. People know what that's like. And the long hours of waiting. And personally, I felt at a complete loss of control and a hampering of my own self-efficacy. I realized in that environment that I had completely lost my structural power. I was in a hospital, and I didn't even know how to affect change. Honestly, the ones who made the huge difference for us and who got us through it were the nurses. And they became such important figures to us that I remember their names. There was a wonderful clinical nurse named Val who was really caring and compassionate, and she made a huge difference. When the discharge plan was up in the air, she took it upon herself to connect the pieces, and she interacted with each one of us with insight and caring. And also the nurse manager, Margaret Higgins, she invited me to her office to share my concerns. Both of these individuals are not surprisingly BC nurses. They both tuned in, recognized our distress, invited our concerns, and restored a sense of control to our situation by stopping, listening, and information sharing. They were both completely present. I think this is so important for all of us every day to slow down and have the personal interactions. At the end of the day, after all our work is accomplished, it's what we'll remember, and in the realm of this discussion, it's certainly what's most powerful. So that leads me to a concept called emotional contagion in organizations. If we ourselves are good leaders by sharing information and supporting our colleagues, and we can be authentic and exercise qualities like self-awareness, relational transparency, and presence, then we create sort of a reinforcing loop in our organizations, what I call a positive organizational climate, and that certainly encourages empowerment when you have that. The way it works is pretty simple. Organizations are made of people, and people thrive on positive relationships. Positive experiences then drive trust and commitment toward goals. And all of this wraps together leads people to have personal and organizational well-being. So I'm going to show you another short video clip. This one is of one of our patients, Susan Butler. Susan was a patient who I got to know well. She was a longtime survivor of simultaneous breast and ovarian cancer. She was a cancer activist and very empowered in the personal sense. Because Susan was so inspiring, she was the perfect example of how emotional contagion works in organizations. So I have her on this video today. And this video clip is the second miracle in my talk today. It's of Susan speaking at the dedication of the new Clinical Research Center in 2004.
It really is the family of man here. In all its glory and misery, pain and celebration, it is real life here in the House of Hope. Here's what I know. This magnificent clinical center is first and last its people, with brains and hearts dedicated to saving lives, prolonging lives, improving the quality of lives. Special people of iron will, who get up every day determined to do the best they know how for the sickest of people, Those of us who come here, our hearts in our hand, hoping for a miracle. I don't know what tomorrow will bring for me, nor do any of us, but whatever comes, I have had my miracle.
So I learned a lot by watching Susan and listening to her over the years, her gratitude, her passion, her strength in the face of serious illness represented the type of energy that empowers me in my role. She made me want to give more, work harder, and I knew she represented every patient. Her inspiration was contagious. I want to share one personal story about Susan that related to my relationship with her. Several years ago, we were preparing for a presidential visit to the clinical center. Susan had been invited to represent the patients as the lone greeter to President Obama at the entrance. That morning, I was busy taking my orders from junior White House aides. Susan called me on my cell phone. She was hysterical. She was lost on campus, and she could barely talk, and told me there was no way she could do this today. I asked her where she was. She said she had been diverted to the South Entry and detained by the Secret Service. Apparently, she told them she was there to greet the president, and they didn't believe her. So I told her to stay where she was, and I relinquished my role as head logistics coordinator, and without any hesitation, I became her nurse. I got in my minivan while staying on the phone with her. I found her, I brought her to my office, I gave her some tea, I massaged her a bit, and I prayed in my heart that she would calm down. And thankfully, she did. So here she is. She was terrific, and she, on the left here, is greeting the president, and then escorting him to the auditorium with the director of the NIH. She understood the concept of giving positive energy and getting it back in return. It was like a reciprocity in action. She gave it to me, and I gave it back to her, and it became a reinforcing loop. And I learned from it. She raised my awareness to paying attention to the human needs in organizations. And here's what she wrote to me that evening. Dear Maureen, when I take on Mount Everest, you must be at my side. You rescued me above and beyond the call, and I'm very grateful. You know how I treasure the clinical center. It is the house of hope. I think his visit with us yesterday was the highlight of a very tough time, and my chemo got the best of me. Anyways, I thought when I suggested to the president that he should work the rope line a little, that maybe we could give him back some positive energy, and I like to think that we did. I share this because what I know to be true is that our power in organizations to get things done comes from positive relationships, and our satisfaction comes from meaningful human interactions. It's important for all of us as we think about taking up our roles as nurses, whether clinical or administrative or teachers, to know where we find our personal inspiration, because it's here that we'll find our personal power. So I wrap these concepts together with one final graphic. The two concepts here that I show are the logos and the mythos, and I'm influenced by some recent studies that I've pursued in the theory of human development from a Swiss psychologist named Gisela Lebouvief. And she asserts that adult maturity is not exclusively associated with growing rationality and objectivity, what she calls logos. Over time, we may not continue to get intellectually smarter, but we can grow wiser, what she calls mythos. She contends that intelligent maturity is best described as an integration of logical thought modes coupled with experiential reflection and human wisdom. And authentic leadership, I think, brings about this balance in organizations. In our actions with others, whether patients or employees, especially as we gain experience in our careers, we figure out how to support each other so that we can create and embrace the meaningful work. We all know what those kind of fulfilling experiences feel like in organizations when someone steps in and with their presence fills a void, and in doing so, makes a real difference. I close with a couple of examples about the way that our nurses in the clinical center have contributed to the mythos. A few years ago, they created our annual gingerbread house contest in the lobby, and every year, all people around campus participate, and the displays become more elaborate, and it fills the whole lobby, and the patients, especially the pediatric patients, love it. We have all the patients vote to see who has the best gingerbread house, and all the units compete against each other, and our lobby is filled with such joy over the holidays because of the nurses. They were instrumental in bringing about both the Children's Inn and our Edmund J. Safra Family Lodge at NIH because they recognize the needs of our patients and reinforce that while they're away from home, they have to have a home-like environment because our patients are with us sometimes for weeks and months at a time. And this is an initiative that's close to my heart, Project Search. I introduced this program into our organization 5 years ago, and it's a school-to-work transition program for students with intellectual disabilities who otherwise have a really tough time getting mainstream employment. And we have had about 48 interns over the past 4 years. We just started our 5th class, and we have a 75% hire rate into full-time jobs, which blows away the population as a whole in hiring people with intellectual disabilities. And the picture on the right I love because it gets back to the concept of commitment and emotional contagion. So Shane Wade, who's the young man in the dark suit on the left, was the first Project Search intern to be hired at the clinical center. That's his supervisor. Shane came to us with some disabilities, but with amazing computer skills. So he computerized our laundry inventory in the hospital. So of course we wanted to hire him when he was finished his internship. And the suit he's wearing, the housekeepers in the laundry section pitched in and bought him for his interview so that he could get the job. He got the job, yeah. So as nurses, we have many opportunities to contribute to creating positive organizational climates. Healthcare is changing. The power structures are in flux. Change always presents opportunity. And for the nursing profession, it's important to realize that we represent the largest sector of the health professions with more than 3 million registered nurses in the United States. So power is necessary to be able to influence an individual or a group, but if we take a fight for our rights approach to empowerment, I think we risk being seen as underdogs and actually reinforcing the hierarchy. We need to tap into our positive and authentic personal power to be able to influence patients, physicians, and each other. We have expert power to do so, and I listed some of the ways that I think nurses have expertise to be authentic in organizations. We know human development. We're committed to patient care. We have an ability to nurture. We have tremendous skill in diverse roles, and we have an ability to self-reflect. So in closing, I think that when we as nurses acknowledge that our individual and collective strength is not so much about the hierarchy, but about modeling for others our caring, competence, and confidence, then we can provide the foundation for all types of human well-being in our healthcare organizations. Whether we are talking about our patients or our employees, people rely on us. And only when we believe that our actions really make a difference will we step forward fully empowered, meet the challenges of our roles, and be a part of the miracles. Thank you.
I feel exactly the same way. So we have a little bit of time for questions, and I'm sure that some of you must have some great questions. So I'm going to turn the microphone back to Maureen, and we'll look at which one of you is that brave person who's going to raise your hand first?
Put my glasses on. Yes, Mr. Chakowski.
Congratulations on being a doctor. If you could give one piece of advice to a student at the beginning of their career to help them discern their path, what would that piece of advice be?
So that's a good question. I got to spend a lot of time today with students here at BC, and we talked about that a little bit. And what I would say to somebody at the beginning is not to feel like you have to define your goal, where you're going to be 5 years from now or where you're going to be 10 years from now, because I think that circumstances in life change, and your career has to fit into your life in a way that you can achieve balance. And so you have to tune into what you like to do. You have to tune into, are you in a place where you like the people and what you're doing? And you have to be sort of attuned to your everyday situation and let the decision emerge in the fullness of time. I think oftentimes we try to make decisions because closure feels so good to us. But then if we waited 2 more weeks and had that extra piece of information, it would have been a better decision. So I think that what I would tell young people starting out is to really listen to your desires and what you want to do, and don't make your decisions too quickly. Enjoy yourself along the way.
Could you say something about your observations on how the work environment has changed, the systems you've worked in, the institution that you've been in, how that environment has changed in your career?
Thank you. Yeah, I think the biggest change that I've seen is that people are more willing to collaborate across disciplines. I don't think that the boundaries on organizational roles are so rigid. At the NIH, there's a big push to do collaborative research across science disciplines and across institutes, and intramural and extramural collaborations. And what I've seen in the hospital, my own experience, and across the institution, is people aren't so concerned about where you work or what your role is. They seem to be more concerned about how can we just get it done. And I think that helps in the face of so many resource challenges and other challenges that we face in organizations, to have those open communication lines and the boundaries being less rigid. I think that's definitely shifted in my time. Yes.
Dr. Gormley, I was curious, when I saw the first graphic of your career path, it kind of went a lot of different ways. And I was thinking about that, and I was also thinking about how long you've been at the institutes, which is kind of rare, I think, for
Right.
a lot of careers.
Right.
So my thought is that over this course of time, you must have taken a number of different risks, or maybe challenged yourself to try things. And I was thinking maybe you could share a little bit about that. You've certainly pursued your, your educational learning along the way too. So maybe you could talk a little about that.
Sure, thank you. And this is something I also talked about today with the students and faculty. To stay in an institution so long, I had to think of ways to reinvent myself all along the way, because you can get stale and you can feel like you're not challenged. And honestly, one of the reasons I've stayed at the NIH, I love the NIH. It's an amazing place to work. The people are committed, and you can just feel it when you walk in the front door of the hospital. But I have also stayed because it allows me to balance my work and my family, and I have 2 children, and that's really important, most important to me. So along the way, I have reinvented myself many, many times. When I first got there, I spent about 5 years studying quality improvement in healthcare. That was when TQM was first coming from the manufacturing industry to the service industry. And so we figured out how to apply it to healthcare. And I worked with individuals from our hospital and hospitals around the country. And then we trained all 2,000 employees and how do you do continuous quality improvement. So that was kind of a phase of my career. Then we had the new hospital phase, where I really learned a lot about construction. I learned a lot about facilities and space planning, and I learned a lot about the importance of listening to patients when you're designing a hospital. And we actually built a simulated patient room in one of the lower lobbies of our hospital, where we could take some of our patients that were able to out of their hospital rooms, and they could go try out our architecturally designed new hospital room so they could tell us what was wrong with it. People told us, don't make us sit in the bed and look at ourselves in the mirror. That's not what you want to do or what you want to see when you're a patient. And they told us how to set up the room so that it was more convenient for them and the nurses. So I had a whole phase, 5 or 7 years, where I was really into hospital planning and design. And we had to redesign all of our processes when we moved into the hospital. Like, how are we going to deliver the food? Every single operational process had to be redesigned. So that was a phase. And then there was my employee accountability phase, where I studied, one of the things about the federal government is that people aren't great at holding others accountable, and resources are so important. And when you're in a hospital, you can't have people who are not pulling their full weight. So I hired a lawyer who I had been working with as the deciding official on all of our employee cases, and asked her, why don't you come work with me and we can figure out how to prevent these problems. So we really got a handle on employee performance and discipline, and our program spread across the NIH. So I really figured out for a good while how to enhance accountability, and studied it and learned a lot of rules and regulations, and we implemented a big training program in our hospital for how people should communicate more effectively when they're giving feedback to others. And then my last phase, which I'm in now, I'm still in, is my big push over the past 5 years was really our disability employment hiring effort. And I did actually my dissertation on stigma against employees with intellectual disability by studying the evolution of coworker perceptions over time. So I kind of blended in my organizational initiative with my educational effort. And so I've had kind of chunks in my career and made sure that I stay fresh, because when you're in the same place for a long time, it can get difficult. Yeah. Yes?
Do you have aspirations to move to a different level in your institution, or do you plan to continue?
Since people at NIH might be looking at this later, I should probably say that, yes, I have a lot of aspirations in my institution. I love the clinical center, and I've chosen to stay in the clinical center my whole career, as opposed to going to one of the other institutes, because my job as an administrator at the clinical center allows me to do the patient mission. So any job somebody would want me to do would have to be careful not to put me in the wrong seat on the bus with that passion that I have. So, yes.
Hi,
Hello.
my name's Felita.
Oh,
I
someone.
was at the tea meeting earlier, and I know you talked about this with us, but I just want to let everybody know, and so you can answer it for us. So, how does someone who doesn't have managerial skills develop empowerment? Because you said that we have to recognize the conditions and then apply our managerial skills or strategies.
Mm-hmm.
What if somebody doesn't have those skills? Like, how
Well,
do you...
the thing about those skills is that those are really human communication skills. So sharing information, if you think about if you're a frontline nurse and you're learning to take care of patients at the bedside, your job is to empower the patient so that they have self-efficacy, so they feel like they can get better, and so that they're not taken down by the massive challenge that they're probably going through. So it's really the same strategies. It's giving them the resources that they need in terms of education and what they can learn to get better, the information about what's going on for them while they're in the hospital, the open communication. It's really all the same strategies for a frontline nurse. And what you learn is those strategies are really human relations type strategies and not just leadership or management strategies.
Thank you. Hi, Maureen.
Hello.
So great to be here tonight listening to you. Thank you. Wondering if what your words on change would be in dealing with change and encouraging words on change, because as we all know, change is so much a part of what we do, adapting to change, and in the leadership sense, championing change and so just
Right.
wondering what your thinking
Right.
is on that. Thanks.
So Susan and I were talking about change on the way down here. People don't like change. It's really threatening. And people think that they're going to lose out on their stability, or some of their, personal conditions will change if something happens in the organization to create change. So it's really all about the same thing. It's about being honest with people and saying, this is happening and we can't fight it. So how can we make the best of it? How can we be in it together? How can we plan our future? How can we anticipate what might happen for us so that we don't become surprised by it? And I think in order to do that, you have to look at the environment in which you're functioning. I mean, if you're considering the whole healthcare industry itself, it's in complete change. There was a report written 4 years ago in 2010 by the Institute of Medicine about the future of nursing, and it addressed that whole topic. How can nurses take up their roles in the healthcare enterprise, which is so changing? So I think being aware of the environment and knowing what might happen to us and having really strong teammates so that we can weather it together, and then being proactive so that if we have a vision, either personally or collectively, for where we want to go, figuring out how to plan that vision into the change that's happening. It's easier said than done. Yes. We have about 700 nurses in the clinical center. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
And thank you. I think we're all going to really spend some time reflecting and having some presence and thinking about how we move forward together. But the next place we're going to move is hopefully out to the reception where we'll continue our conversations and where you can continue to ask Dr. Gormley some questions. Thank you so much for being here today, and we look forward to seeing you in the reception.